This is Wild Nevadacast. I'm Dave Santina in the studios of PBS Reno in Reno, Nevada, and today I have a special guest, and I actually have a timely podcast because I'm talking to Susan Norman. Do you go by Susan or Sue?
Mostly Sue.
Okay, Sue Norman, who is tomorrow, when this podcast drops on June 23rd, tomorrow, June 24th, is the release date of a book that Sue wrote called Risk, A Life Saved by the River. And I'm excited that we get to talk about that and also just your experience as an outdoors person. You've done everything, and you're a great resource. So thank you for coming in.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be here.
So we have we were introduced by a mutual friend who was a guest on a different podcast. So every other week we alternate. It's either Wild Nevadacast or PBS Reno Arts. Karen Terry was a guest on PBS Reno Arts. She emailed me and said, "Hey, I got somebody for you. You need to talk to Sue Norman." And so we started to go back and forth, and you were able to come in, and I'm excited. And the timing is perfect because I get to feel like I'm helping to promote a brand new product with this book. So this is really cool. You have a history of being in the outdoors, and it's shaped you in such a way that I've lived indoors most of my life, and so I find it fascinating to learn about people who have been shaped so much by their outdoor life. And so, what's your background? Introduce yourself to us.
Well, when you refer to my lifetime in the outdoors, that started with my father, and he was very inspired by early adventures and explorers of the U.S., John Wesley Powell, Lewis and Clark, and he started taking our family on overnight canoe trips when I was 2.5 years old in the Ozarks.
Wow, so early.
Yeah, so I don't really remember not being on a river.
Gotcha, okay, cool. I see, I had a father who hunted and fished and wanted me to come with him, and I went a couple of times, and it wasn't my bag, and so I feel like I failed him as an outdoors person. But you got inspired. Yeah,
not right away. I have to say, I always liked camping, but whitewater was scary. When I was a young kid, and we had our share of spills on the river, and my mom figured out early on when to tell him me and the kids are walking, and we go around the rapid while my dad ran through it. But he kept us involved. I learned how to whitewater kayak when I was 13 with him, and through that I started getting into whitewater kayak competition. And the main reason that was attractive to me is I saw that as a way to develop skills in a safe environment, and then I wouldn't be so scared on the river.
Wow, that's a very mature thinking for a young person.
It was survival, yeah. And it was also fun. I mean, the kayak races were fun, and the other kids that were doing it that became my peer group when I was in middle school and high school, those were the kids that I wanted to be around.
Okay. So, I mean, you obviously were very good at it, because for those of you who don't know, Sue is a United States slalom kayak team member and a U.S. women's whitewater rafting team member, and has won world championships in rafting. That's incredible to me. I'm sitting next to a world champion. I'm excited by that. That's really cool. What goes into becoming that high level performer in that world?
Yeah, it's a lifetime of work at your sport. And, I'd been on the U.S. slalom kayak team for probably about 6 years, I think, total. And I decided to retire from that when I finished graduate, because that wasn't a way to make a living.
Right.
But it was very exciting.
Unless you're going to be a instructor or be on the beach all summer and do lessons, but that's not going to make you much of a life.
Yeah. So I, did the adult thing and got my graduate degree, and then I got a job working as a hydrologist for the U.S. Forest Service in Lake Tahoe.
Beautiful place to be. I mean, and you have total access to all of the outdoor activity you could possibly want.
Yes, and my connection with the river went in a whole deeper level, because I learned how to do watershed restoration work, stream channel restoration work, got to know things about rivers and river science, that was super exciting, professionally.
Yeah.
And then when I was, well on my way to being a professional person and just recreating for fun, some women that I knew from my days of working as a raft guide, putting myself through college, contacted me and said, we need to form a women's team to go to Siberia for the first international rafting competition being held in Russia.
Wow.
Well, the Soviet Union, I guess you'd call it, in Siberia.
This was one in the 80s?
1989.
Okay.
During Perestroika.
Huh.
And we are, I think, the largest delegation of Americans to go to the Soviet Union after the fall of the Iron Curtain. So it was very exciting, and it was it was a peace rally and a friendship rally along with being a competition. But that was, when I went there, I was the team kayaker, but we had all these rafters, other women that were rafting. We were all participating in this event together. And then that team stayed together to do more rafting events, which it just started then. I mean, that
was the beginning of competitive rafting?
Yes. It was through an organization called Project Raft, Russians and Americans for Teamwork. And they did a number of high-level international competitions around the world. And it was very, it really spread rafting across the planet, South America, Central America, obviously the Soviet Union, all these places. And the U.S. had developed commercial rafting kind of before anybody else. And we were spreading that technique, that information and the rafting boats and all the stuff. And all these other countries realized there was this recreation tourism opportunity because they had these beautiful, exciting rivers.
Yeah.
And tourists were already coming there to do other things. And it's like, boy, if we can figure out what sections of these rivers to raft, then we can make a lot of money taking people down the rivers.
Yeah, I guess that is a whole discipline of having to sort of research the actual river and determine where you can put in safely, where you can come out safely, and what's fun but not too dangerous, and how to categorize it. This is all, I'm imagining this as we talk because I have never really thought about that until you just brought it up.
Yeah, and so my friends that asked me to join them on this team happened to be some of the most competent whitewater raft guides in the world. They had started in California, and then, following adventure, had worked in different countries around the world and had a very high level of expertise. Because I was very nervous about rafting at first, because you can't do an Eskimo roll in a raft. So when you flip a kayak,
right?
If you've had some experience yourself.
I have flipped a kayak. I have on television. Good job, Dave. Yes, on television. But I am very inexperienced, and it showed. I got distracted, and I was out. And so that part I know how to do. I know how to flip over.
Yeah.
I've never learned the rest.
Yeah, and that's a key skill to have.
Yeah.
Well, in a raft, you can't roll it back up, but fortunately you can hang on to ropes and stuff and pull yourself back in eventually. But anyway, I started rafting with this group of women, and we were like the first group of women to compete in these events that mostly had men competing in them. And we were the first ones that could compete on the same level as the men. And so we won because there were not that many teams that even existed. But it was also very gratifying to see our placement when we kind of compare ourselves overall. Very commonly, we'd be in the top 10 in the men's as well.
Yeah. So is the skill required to be excellent in rafting? Does it sort of cross over?
It crosses over in that the first thing about doing any river recreational sport is knowing about the river
Okay.
and knowing how it works and how to read whitewater and knowing where to be safe and when to walk.
So, is it something you can describe? How do you, what do you see when you look out and you say, all right, I know where we're going to go? Like, what is the key, or what are the visual cues that tell you which way you should go?
Yeah, it actually, when I first started teaching kayaking, I realized I couldn't explain it to people because it was a language I had learned growing up on the river.
Okay.
And I didn't even know how I knew how to read whitewater. But through teaching, I realized I have to put this into words and explain to people and understand myself what it is that you're doing. But it's really too complicated to put into words. You really kind of have to have an example to show people, but you're looking for, the main thing is you always look away from your danger, and you look for the lines in the river that are taking you to safety. So if there's a big rock over to your right and a big hole onto your left, you're not looking at that. You're looking at that channel of water that goes between the big rock and the big hydraulic.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's a good tip. Pro tip from a real expert. So you did all this. You come back. You're working at Tahoe, recreating there, having a great life there, and then things happen in your life that are part of what you write about in this book. And we should get to this book, because that is the motivator for you to be here in the first place. Is this book that comes out tomorrow, Risk: A Life Saved by the River. I guess my first question is just straight up from the title itself. Is it your life that was saved by the river? Or are we talking about you?
It's actually my life mostly, but when you read the book, you will find out that it also helped save my father, my mother in a way, and I believe it will help my adopted nephew, who is now my son.
Wow,
in his life.
That's profound. And also, I suspect that you hope that it will help people who read the book as well.
Yes.
So how did the river provide for you all?
So what I found, and going back to our friend Kat Terry, I was in a writing workshop with her for almost 5 years. That's how I was able to create this book. And, I was just going to write paddling stories. And what she helped me to do is figure out why I did this sport, how it shaped me. And then as she got to know more about me and my son, how I used the skills and the kind of the lessons I've learned through my many years of being a whitewater paddler to just deal with life. And it really comes down to being able to take risk, what I call good risk, to develop the skills to be able to deal with bad risk. And by bad risk, I'm referring specifically to when they refer to families that are in at-risk situation.
Okay.
And that means a family that is no longer able to maintain a safe, secure, or stable environment. And it has very well-documented impacts on children that grow up in that environment.
So what is a skill? Can you describe a skill that you translated into this other world?
So the main skill is, one, not being afraid to take risk. So when I was presented with the situation that my son was in, my nephew at the time, and realized that his biological parents were no longer going to take care of him. He was going to end up in foster care. I was the only person that could keep that from happening. I never wanted to have children. I was 56 years old. I didn't think it's like, I'm not going to be a good parent. I don't know how to do this. This is terrifying.
Right.
But I knew I had to do it. And so, like being at the top of a Class 5 rapid, I just had to plunge in.
Nice.
The difference was, And I knew this, when I worked my way up to being an expert in whitewater paddling and competition, I was able to do that in steps.
Right. You could work up to a 5.
I could work up to it. When I adopted my nephew, I went over a waterfall into a class 5 rapid with class 2 skills. And I knew that. But what I also knew from my lifetime on the river is that the way you get better at a sport, and particularly one that's as challenging and as scary as whitewater can be, is to take it in small steps and look for experts that can help you and bite off manageable challenges.
That seems reasonable. So can you remember a situation where you had to apply that to yourself and had it work out?
With my parenting journey?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, when I adopted my nephew, I soon realized that he had a number of behavior outcomes from spending the first 4 years in not an abusive environment, but definitely a neglected one. And that resulted in delayed emotional regulation and development. And it resulted in these behaviors that were very challenging for my interaction with him and his interaction with his peers. So starting from his first year when he was going to daycare, I would get calls 2 to 3 times a week saying, "You've got to come get Seth," because if he would get in these conflicts with his peers. And I didn't know how to handle that at all.
Sure.
And I'd never had gone to counseling myself. I'd never experienced that. I'd never dealt with like mental health issues. And I started reaching out to experts. And that changed everything. And very fortunate this isn't really talking about wild Nevada.
That's okay.
Or in a certain way, but it is, I think the outdoors is a very powerful force to help calm the mind and help create an environment for the kinds of things that my nephew struggled with, and along with the counseling that I got through county services and the school, we started developing the skills to navigate this emotional whitewater that we were in.
Gotcha. So did you also incorporate the actual outdoors as a part of your experience together to kind of grow together?
Yes. So as soon as, when we first brought Seth home from Cleveland and we went for a dog walk out at Prosser Reservoir, if you know where that is, outside Truckee.
Yeah.
And he had to go to the bathroom. And we said, well, you can just go pee behind the bush. And he looked at us like we were insane. And we had to actually go to the bathroom behind the bush to show him that it was okay to do that.
To demonstrate it.
And then he was able to go. And I realized right away, it's like, this poor kid's never even been to a park, or anywhere where he can go to the bathroom outside.
Right.
And we just need to spend a lot more time outside. And I started taking him on overnight raft trips when he was 5. And when we went on our first raft trip, and I had Seth for about a year at that point, that raft trip was the first time that I felt relaxed and not anxious, because he was so engaged in the whole experience of camping on the beach, collecting rocks and sticks, going through the whitewater, sleeping outside under the stars. And I realized that it was not only incredibly healing for me, it was healing for him.
Yeah. That's really powerful. And I imagine that your book is probably a good introduction to that notion to people who maybe have, are maybe not in exactly the same situation, but who maybe don't realize that healing power that can come from just getting away.
Yeah. And that's what I hope people do get from the book, because I actually didn't understand what my life in rivers had provided to me until I started writing about it and working in this writing group and really understanding why I was so drawn to it and why I kept doing outdoor sports and still do, because of all the different ways it benefits us physically, emotionally, and mentally.
Well, I look forward to finishing the book. I read a little bit. There's an excerpt on your website,
The first 2 chapters,
which
yes.
I appreciate,
Mm-hmm.
as I was able to get a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of getting into it, and so now I look forward to finishing the full story. And it's a fascinating story, and you mentioned it. It mentions that that it jumps a bit in time. When you're writing something like this, how do you decide, or do you decide how to structure it? Does it just tell you what it is, or do you is it a piece of work that actually took a lot of manipulation to get where you needed it?
Yes, it took manipulation, and it took work with very competent editors. When I first turned in my first manuscript to the first editor that I'd hired, she came back to me and said, this is very good writing. You've got a great story. You have to cut this by a third.
Ah, okay.
So
and how did that feel at that moment?
Awful. I was like, how am I going to do that? And the other thing she told me, because I had written some chapters about my experiences with Seth becoming a new parent after menopause and trying to figure that out. And then I had a lot of chapters about, very exciting chapters, very thrilling chapters about whitewater rafting and kayaking different parts of the world.
Right.
But she told me, she's the one that pointed out to me, is your parenting story is the core of your memoir. And your rafting experience is great, and it provides this unique background, but it's the parenting story. So that's what I ended up having to do, and she worked with me very closely to figure out which chapters to cut. And there's a common phrase in writing, letting go of your darlings.
Yep.
I had to do that a lot. There's a lot of great stories that aren't in the book, but the ones that are in there are there for a purpose.
Right.
And they weave in and out with this journey that I was on with my nephew.
So you have maybe another book that you've already written that was the excised stuff that could be maybe a guidebook or a rafting book.
Maybe, but probably not. They'll
No?
probably just stay in their little cradles forever.
Well, I appreciate that you made the effort. My wife is a writer and editor and has done a number of book edits, and so I feel your pain because
Yeah.
I've heard stories from her end,
Mm-hmm.
and the amount of work it takes to even just to do a first draft is overwhelming in my mind. So I'm just so impressed that this result of this effort is here in front of us and is about to be released. Is this book available everywhere?
Yes, the press that I'm with, She Writes Press, has a partnership with Simon & Schuster, so it's available in Barnes & Noble, many independent bookstores, and if you ask an independent bookstore if they haven't thought to carry it, they will. They can order it. It's also available on Amazon and Bookshop.
Nice. Okay. So looking forward to finishing Risk. I got the first couple of chapters under my belt, and now I'm ready to see what comes next. So thank you for bringing that and sharing the story. I am curious. It is the Wild Nevadacast, so I do want to know a little bit about your love for this area and your suggestions for people. You're up at Tahoe.
Mm-hmm.
You're a whitewater expert. I think about, we're in Reno right now. I think about the whitewater course that was built downtown in Reno. And just chatting before we started recording, you mentioned there's one in Sparks too. So are those both worth a visit for people who are either learning or maybe experienced in whitewater?
Yes, they're the whitewater parks on the Truckee River are both great park and play areas to go learn skills, to watch people, and to just have a good time. It depends on water levels and time of the year,
Right.
all that. But particularly the one in Sparks, I think, is my experience there. I led a watershed education program for a couple of years with a group of middle school students that I collected from throughout the Truckee River watershed, and we did a source-to-sea exploration of the Truckee River watershed, starting on the upper Truckee River above Lake Tahoe, all the way down to Pyramid Lake. We did representative reaches of river and one day on the lake to experience and see how a watershed changes and evolves from its source to, in this case, the inland sea of Pyramid Lake.
I love it. Were you rafting down it the whole time, or were you?
Well, we did. We had inflatable kayaks on the first section, and then an outrigger canoe in Tahoe, and then we rafted 2 sections of the Truckee River where it gets a little wilder through Truckee and through Reno, above Reno. And then we're back in the rubber duckies going on a beautiful section that nobody ever does, and I think it's fascinating. It's below Sparks, and you can paddle a section of river there that goes past the Sparks Industrial Complex.
Yeah.
Wild horses, a large section of the river that the Nature Conservancy has restored, replanting cottonwoods.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of different parts of the river to explore.
So for someone like me who is about as novice as you get, how do you get started? How would you recommend somebody approach, beginning this in a safe way that's going to, be maximum fun and minimum risk?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what has become very popular is floating the upper Truckee River above Lake Tahoe, and then there's also a really nice float below Lake Tahoe around Tahoe City.
To River Ranch, right?
River Ranch.
Goes from Tahoe City to River Ranch,
Yeah.
that roadside restaurant and hotel.
Yeah.
I have seen that float and have thought about it, and I have not done it. So you say that would be worth trying?
Oh, yes. And both of those are, you got to read the signs and wear a life jacket so you don't get yourself in trouble, but they're both very mellow sections of river that are going through beautiful alpine, environment.
Yeah, it's a
It's
very
a great
pleasant
day on the water.
It's parallel to the road when you drive by. So anyone who's driven from Tahoe City to Truckee or vice versa has passed it and has driven past it and has probably seen people.
Yeah.
So it always looks so pleasant. So yeah, it sounds like it really is.
And then there are 2 rafting outfitters in Truckee that will provide a really really fun day on the river whitewater sections. They have very skilled guides and they know the river very well.
Nice. My wife and my daughter did one outside of Truckee, and they all ended up at one point in the water, got back out.
Well, it happens sometimes.
They had a moment. It was unusual. The story was that it was unusual, but it can happen. But they were all fine. Everybody was safe. They followed the instructions. They did the right thing, and it came out fine. So if somebody wants to learn, to be at the level you were, is that a thing you can start to do around here, or do you have to go somewhere? Go somewhere to really get serious about it?
Yeah, probably the closest place would be on the South Fork of the American River. There's a couple of kayak schools there for learning whitewater kayaking.
Okay. So,
and there's also a guide schools for learning how to raft.
Gotcha. So you wouldn't recommend people just trying it on their own and just figuring it out on trial and error?
No, never a good idea.
Okay. Fair enough. So now you've got this book out tomorrow. Again, it's the 24th of June. If you're listening to this after the 23rd, then it might be out already, and you can go get a copy. Will you be doing book signings? Are you going to be traveling around doing a tour?
Yes, I have put together a schedule. I'm going to continue to kind of fill gaps where they are, but I will be doing my first book launch author event at Cup of Tahoe in South Lake Tahoe.
Nice.
And then the second one is going to be in Truckee at Alibi Ale Works, and I'm going to be there with 2 other authors who also happen to be friends of mine that I'm connected with through the river, but it's Caroline Paul and Juliet Starrett, who have both actually written New York Times bestsellers, and we're going to have a author conversation about durability, which is a theme that bridges all of our books, even though our books are quite different.
I like that idea. So when is that happening?
On July 15th at
July
Alibi
15th.
Ale.
That is a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay.
And then the other event that's local is I will be doing an author event, an In Conversation with event with Kat Terry at Radical Cat in Reno.
Beautiful. And do you have the date on that one?
That's August 15th.
August 15th. Okay. So July 15th and August 15th. I'm writing it down for myself because I'd like to go if I can make it. Kat Terry. I call her Karen because that's the name I knew when she came in and did the podcast for PBS Reno Arts. But I may have to go to Kat. I may have to switch to Kat. I like that better. That's cool. That's a cooler name.
Yeah. And she's also the Nevada County Poet Laureate in California.
Yeah,
so,
that was the impetus for her to come in, was her title, her new title.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. She really she was a wonderful guest. And so have you been? I probably should let you go home at this point. I've been yapping at you for half an hour. Is there anything that we didn't talk about, or any place people can find you, or online, or anywhere that you'd like to mention before we wrap it up?
Yes, I have a website called SueNormanAuthor.com where you can find out more about me and my book. And I also do a monthly blog on wild women in wild environments.
Nice.
Which I think is turning out to be pretty fun.
That's cool, and how appropriate for the Wild Nevadacast that you're talking about, wild women in wild environments. That's beautiful. All right, well, everybody look out for that and get a copy of Risk, A Life Saved by the River, Susan Norman. Sue Norman. I'm going to say Sue. I'm saying Kat and Sue. I'm going short for everybody now, short names.
Because we're friends now.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for coming. Thanks for talking about this. This has been really enjoyable, and I am inspired to go back out and revisit the river, maybe see if I can stay afloat.
Okay. Hope to see you out there.
Thank you. All right. Before we go, I want to remind everybody to watch Wild Nevada on PBS Reno. That's via broadcast or streaming at pbsreno.org and other streaming sources, of course. Also to watch the segments on PBS Reno's YouTube channel. Now, if you have a question about Wild Nevada or maybe a comment or a suggestion, if you do, send them to me at podcasts@pbsreno.org. My thanks to Susan Norman. I want to say thank you for listening to Wild Nevadacast.